Thank you. Good to be here. Are we putting mine? Yeah. My photo is nice, but the presentation would be better. Thank you. My name is Yihtah Curiel. I'm the director of the Department for Digital Diplomacy at the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'm very happy to be here. I'm in Belgrade for 24 hours for the first time in my life, and I have to say I like it very much already. I'm sorry I'm going back tonight. I'll start. Wasting time on the internet. There's a wonderful book by Kenneth Goldsmith, a professor at Penn State University, and it reflects on how older people, when they talk about the television, they say, I don't listen much to the television. And we, my generation, when we scream at our children, stop watching the internet all day, we are reflecting on what we grew up in as the television, right? We used to watch television, so we think our children are watching the internet. Just like older people think they're listening to the television, because they remember the radio days. But the truth is, just as you don't listen to the TV, you don't watch the internet. And your generation, most of you here are younger than me, unfortunately, is an interactive medium, which we can use to receive and share information, and most of all, to engage with others. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges of digital diplomacy today. The internet isn't primarily for uploading or viewing stuff, it's for engaging with each other. Are we diplomats there yet? Yes, but not systematically enough, not on a wide enough scale. We diplomats are traditionally experts at engagement, but the digital world is presenting us with new challenges and opportunities as well as threats, some of which force us to redefine our profession. What's for sure is that we're not wasting our time on the internet. Social media today are premier sources of information for young people, from news to entertainment to forming relationships. We must be there. And the truth is that we must go beyond sharing information to learning how we can influence the way that information is traveling in this world. How to slow down hate speech and incitement, and how to make sure that our narrative is amplified to the right audiences. So this, I think, is the future of digital diplomacy. But what exactly is digital diplomacy? It's actually the continuation of diplomacy by other means. It's not an end, but a means to an end. If it is to be effective, it has to be useful in promoting our foreign policy goals, right? So essentially, we in Israel are doing two main things to advance Israeli policies. We're trying to show Israel at its best, what often goes unnoticed by the media, which naturally focuses on crisis and blood and catastrophe, which we're not short of any of these, unfortunately, in our region. So we're showing what anyone who would visit Israel would see, just like I've seen in these past 24 hours in Belgrade. A vibrant society, amazing things to see, from tourism to archaeology to high-tech, great food. That's one part. The second, more important part, is to engage with different narratives about Israel. We produce content that aims to show our perspective on the regional developments, on the negative influence of Iran that was exposed last week on social media when Twitter and Facebook shut down 200-300 accounts, on the situation in Syria and on other geopolitical issues. So our key challenge is how to translate our relative advantage in engaging real-world communities, which is what diplomats have done throughout history, into the digital world. Now, what is our advantage, actually, you may ask? Our advantage is that a foreign ministry, any foreign ministry, yours as well, is by definition a global institution. It's local and global at the same time. As diplomats, we have under our hands a unique apparatus. Our assets include hundreds of diplomats who engage with unique, authentic communities all over the globe. Not made-up communities, not online communities, actual real people. And that's a very big asset, as any PR executive will tell you. We are the #4 best connected MFA in the world. We work in over 50 languages across 5 social media platforms with about 800 or 900 unique social media accounts. So we engage, we share information, we react, and we seek out our adversaries as well. The communities that we engage with also help us do a very important thing, which is to break the echo chambers that are an integral part of the digital world. We all have friends on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter, and many of us are hearing the same opinions of our friends, and we struggle to find, opposite opinions, or we're not interested in them. But our aim is always to engage with audiences that don't necessarily support us, but with those who know nothing about the region perhaps, but are interested in knowing more. Now, just like the physical world, the digital world isn't a paradise. There are some good guys and some bad guys. In other words, there are threats and opportunities. I'll start with the bad news. The threats that we see in the digital world today, and that are not unique to Israel, are misinformation, for example. And in our case, why is there misinformation about Israel? Well, there's hundreds of reporters that are stationed in Israel, and they all have to write things, and that creates a biased view of Israel vis-a-vis the region, just like the maps of the world where the countries in the north seem bigger, right? And so the same goes for Israel. Why do we have hundreds of journalists? Because many of the journalists who cover the Middle East are not very comfortable covering it from Syria or from other countries that are in turmoil. It's actually been very dangerous over the past 5 or 6 years. So they cover the region from Israel. The other reason is, as I said before, echo chambers. Online information, it's now almost a cliche, but every cliche has a grain of truth, and internet and online information has a serious credibility problem. And when we see that journalists too get a lot of their information from social media, that can become a problem. So that's misinformation. We also have disinformation, and that we've seen in the past year has been in the news quite a lot. State actors that are working actively and put in a lot of resources in order to influence what's going on online and to create false narratives. I think the latest example really is last week. Twitter and Facebook actually came together to shut down Iranian activity, over 200 accounts, followed by almost 1 million people that were operating for a few years, basically spreading propaganda and anti-European, anti-American sentiment. How do we know that this is an actual threat? I think one way to know is that it was enough for the tech companies to decide to cooperate to neutralize it. And Mark Zuckerberg said just this week, no company can win this fight on its own. So this is something that is being taken very seriously. But now to the good news. I think the good news is that digital diplomacy at its best means for us communicating directly with our target audiences. We can bypass government and speak directly to their citizens. We can reach more people than ever with many fewer filters. We can influence public opinion and bring about changes in foreign policy. We can connect Israeli communities with like-minded groups abroad. And we are now, I think, in a very interesting point in this digital sphere. Even in the last few days, when you see Twitter and Facebook testifying before Congress, people saw what happened with the elections, and they're actually worried about the next elections, not only in the US, but in Europe as well. And I think the early viewpoint that we had, 5, 6 years ago, about social media was, this is a great new world that's going to connect us all in total freedom. And we've moved from this very positive perspective to a kind of, this is a very sinister and dangerous world, abused by economic interest and criminals and whatnot. And that's what many people think today. And I think we need to shift the pendulum back to a more optimistic thinking. At least that's my opinion. We're very aware of the threats that we face in this universe, but we're much more excited about the opportunities that it can offer us. And I'll give you one example of those opportunities, which is just fresh in my mind. So about a month ago, we are working in 5 languages from our headquarters. Hebrew and English, Arabic, Farsi, and Spanish. Don't ask why not other languages, long story. But these are the ones we decided are worthwhile for us right now. And our Arabic language feed, which goes on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, is one of our most successful. So we launched a month ago, together with an NGO, a program whereby Arab people from around the Middle East, Arab speakers, can go online and speak with an Arab-speaking Israeli doctor. You know, in Israel we have a 20% Arab minority, so there's no lack of Arab-speaking doctors. We didn't know how it would work, and it's working amazingly. And people from Saudi Arabia and Jordan and Iraq are going online to chat with an Israeli doctor to ask about diabetes and chronic illnesses and whatever. And think about it. These are governments, some of which we don't have relationships. Officially, we are at war with some of them. And their citizens are calling up the Israeli doctor, and this is obviously a free thing. And this happens not only in the medical field, it happens on many fields, that when you connect people to people, just like you do with your friends on social media, you don't care if your friend is from Iran, and neither do we. And so that offers us a bypass, a direct access to these populations, which is great for us, obviously, because we can educate and engage about Israel. So this is something we're proud of. Now, to be able to do all this, we have to also maintain a constant conversation with the creators, not to say gods, of this universe, right? And there we have some new things that we would never have imagined in the past. What's our most important digital mission today? It's not Washington or London, it's San Francisco, where we have a consulate, an actual consulate. But direct engagement with these actors who create the digital sphere, and with the hundreds of companies that are managing and amplifying this ecosystem, has become very important in recent years. We are lucky because Israel is seen rightly as a startup nation, and so a very large percentage of these companies in Silicon Valley have R&D centers in Israel. So we have direct contact, sometimes Israeli people who are working there, and so the contact is made a bit easier. But we have in our ministry an ambassador for digital diplomacy, and this guy's work is exactly to maintain a relationship with these companies, to tell what our concerns are. And we make a distinction between digital diplomacy, which is what I've talked about, and diplomacy in the digital world, which is what this guy does. So together with these companies and governments, we can formulate legislation against incitement, recruitment to terror, some of the problems that we see online. Tech companies, over the past year or two, are more eager to be part of this conversation. They used to say, we're just a tech platform, content is, that's not us. But today they realize that the tools that they provide can and have been abused, and that they must be part of the process of fixing this. As the saying goes, if you're not part of the solution, you may be viewed as part of the problem. So this is, I think, a welcome development. So how do we go about doing this? Detoxifying information sources. It's a very complex and I think important challenge. How to make sure that the online debate around important topics doesn't get sidelined by hate speech or incitement to violence. We are also worried about anti-Semitism, of course. So what we do, we communicate with social media organizations, and we try to think of ways to slow down, if you will, these kinds of messages. The counter-argument to that is a very strong one, freedom of speech. Are you curtailing speech now because of what Israel or the US or Europe think that is wrong? So I think you need to look at it not as a black and white problem, because blocking speech isn't always the only method available. And the digital world is an algorithmic environment. This means that you are not seeing everything that is out there on your feed, on Facebook or Twitter or anywhere else. You are seeing what the algorithm decided would be most interesting for you, according to your friends, your previous choices, and of course according to advertisement considerations, because this is what this is about in the end for the companies. So this algorithm can theoretically be told, just as it didn't show you the last picture of your friend's cat because you already saw 2 cats today, it can also be told that a post that is likely to be hate speech or incitement can be curtailed in its ability to travel the web. Maybe less people should see it, maybe no one. or it can lose the possibility to be liked, or it can generate a message by the company alerting the user that this post potentially falls under a problematic category and do they wish to proceed. So there are different ways other than blocking or allowing. But then at least we wouldn't have the situation where I am collecting Nazi memorabilia and Facebook tells me, oh, look, all these other people are collecting Nazi memorabilia, great, So this is important. The solution doesn't have to be black and white. They can fit into the sphere which already isn't as free as it is made out to be to most of us. So we are also testing the use of algorithmic tools to handle extremist hatred, the kind that is undisputedly illegal online, and we want to speed up the process of removing it, for example. And I'd like to mention briefly how our unit is built, so you have an idea of how we operate. It's a bit different than traditional diplomatic departments at the ministry, less hierarchical and more similar maybe to a newspaper. So anybody in here that's working for PR or journalism, this is not new to them. These three departments, content, social media, and comms, used to have very clear boundaries. Each one had a director, and he reported to the guy above him, which reported to the director general, and it was kind of very proper. I spent some time in London, but we don't operate like this. We operate more like a newspaper editing floor combined with a PR firm and maybe an army unit, kind of a crazy thing like that. And our operational directives are top-down, decided by our Director General and obviously above him the Minister of Foreign Affairs. But our job is to analyze those objectives and to create content and use our digital assets to get it out there. And this workflow involves all these units working together. A compartmentalization that used to be part and parcel of bureaucratic entities like our ministry is no longer an option, because in the end, social media is the first line of comms and also the launch point for a lot of stories that later reach traditional media. So the boundaries are very, very unclear. An integral fourth unit that we have is the research and development unit, whose aim is to scout new technologies and experiment, making sure we remain on the cutting edge of the kinds of technologies that we are looking for, whether to build them in-house or to find the companies that will build them for us. As I said, technologies that can help us curb extreme speech, anti-Semitism, or to amplify our own messages and have them reach the right audiences. But for all of this to operate on a scale of a ministry, ours has about 1,000 employees in Israel and abroad, there is one important precondition, and that precondition is training. So digital diplomacy is new. The department I'm currently heading was formed in 2011. Diplomats are mostly older, right? And so training the next generation of diplomats is an essential part of our job. Our strategy is implemented on all levels, from the cadet course to courses tailored to senior diplomats and ambassadors. We also monitor and enhance the activities of our 100 missions abroad and the about 200, 250 diplomats currently on Twitter. So training can occur either in Jerusalem or at the embassies, and we're also testing use of webinars and different ways we can teach abroad. Often our digital operators abroad are local employees, like at our embassy here, for example, and the advantage is that they have a deep knowledge of the local environment. They know what's right and wrong for this specific community. And so our aim is to give them the tools and know-how that we created. This constant contact that we have between headquarters and embassies is important for the day-to-day, and it's also very important for times of crisis. This is an important field where digital diplomacy is an asset for us, but it also requires us to be highly reactive, like journalists, which we're not necessarily used to. We need to post messages quickly, reacting to a terrorist incident or a natural catastrophe. So for example, we built an app that Israelis can use. Let's say I'm now going to visit the UK, I go into the app and I open up all the countries that we have relations with are on the app. I open the UK and I see if there are any travel advisories on the UK. I see where the embassy is and the phone numbers, and if there is an emergency, where the hospitals are. So I can use this app if I have a problem during my trip, or I anticipate a problem. I want to know if this is a safe place to go to. I can also Google, of course, but here you have an official Israeli voice telling you the kind of official information. But it goes further than that, because today, when an Israeli goes missing on a trek in Latin America, and this happens quite a lot, the first place we'll find this information is on social media, posted by his family or his friends, and we need to be there to react in real time, to acknowledge that we're assisting and that we are replying for their calls. The digital world, as you all know, has flattened hierarchies and changed how the public interacts with its government. If a person tags our ministry on Facebook or Twitter, they judge that account as they would their friend or any other service provider. So reaction times need to be short and information relayed quickly. So we have Hebrew language accounts. We have a Hebrew Facebook and a Hebrew Twitter that are facing to the Israeli public, right? That's not naturally our job. Our job is to face outwardly. But we have those accounts both to show our work to the Israeli public and to react to those things that interest our communities. And you know, we always say that we operate in a zero-mistake environment, because when somebody posts something on Twitter from the embassy here, or when I do it, it's not that somebody personally, it's the state of Israel that just posted something. So when there's a mistake, it's very unfortunate, and the media jump all over us, and it becomes an incident. So we are wary of doing things quickly. But in times of crisis, I think learning to make mistakes is also important, because it's key to shortening response times. So you can't have 10 people authorizing this thing. You're going to have 1 or 2 people, and you may make a mistake. And you have to put that calculation into your the general way that you do things. So we are learning that as well. So I'm towards the end of my presentation. I want to mention how we see the future of diplomacy. So one part of that future is big data. For a while now, analyzing data is no longer possible for any one person or group of persons to be doing on their own. The same is true for the diplomatic world. We are looking to the future. And machines will not be giving us the answers to all our problems, but we need to formulate the right questions that we can ask those machines that will give us an edge in looking at the world, that will help us predict trends that are important to, in our case, Israel's security, economic well-being, trade, and other issues. So my prediction is that diplomats are not going to be replaced by machines anytime soon, but I do think that machine-assisted diplomacy is already here. The algorithms that are running the digital world are part of this trend, and we're constantly thinking how to stay ahead of the curve. This week we participated in Israel in the DLD conference, which is an innovation conference that showcases the best high-tech developments in Israel. And in the past, this wouldn't have been a natural place for a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, right? But it is today, because we are part of that process. Technologies are advancing rapidly, and I think that big data is already being used and will be used much more encompassingly by governments in the next few years. So finally, the question that everybody who has kids, this is the wrong audience, you don't have kids, do you? But everybody who has kids knows that they ask in the car or on the train or on the bus, and that's the question, are we there yet? And there's a professor at Oxford of diplomatic studies, Cornelio Biola, and he wrote recently that ministries of foreign affairs are moving from the stage of setting up the necessary infrastructure to do digital diplomacy to the more ambitious goal of getting it right. There's a difference between having all of that and having 800 accounts or whatever accounts and actually achieving your goals. So I think getting it right means operating a streamlined process of creating content and publishing it, of boosting that content's chances of reaching your audience. But most importantly, getting it right is creating a possibility of engagement with the communities you want to reach. I think the immense edge of a foreign ministry, any foreign ministry, is that we have an actual real-world presence around the globe. and that we have a group of people dedicated to creating actual relationships that we can utilize also in the digital sphere. Getting it right also means setting up partnerships with tech companies and governments and NGOs to create a digital sphere that knows how to diminish dangerous voices and amplify positive ones. I know Serbia is a digitally minded nation with some ambitious policymakers, some of which I've met and will meet today. So I hope I've been able to share some of my experience, and I'm very happy to continue this conversation in the future. Thank you.